PKWARE, so let's get started. So thank you everyone for joining us today for the data you can't see, uncovering and reducing risk. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. Otherwise, we have EJ Pappas, our field CTO here at PKWARE, and Jason Dobbs, our CTO here at PKWARE. With that, EJ, I will send it to you.
Thanks, Sarah. And hello, everybody. I want to walk through the agenda, if we can, please. Next slide, maybe. There we are. There's the agenda. So what we're going to talk about today is a lot about risk. So we're going to talk about the risks of unseen data that exist within your organization and what that can do to affect the safety of your organization, the safety of your data, the ability for you to stay out of the headlines and protect that information as you go forward. We're going to talk about the power of protection, starting fundamentally with data discovery. And then we're going to move into ways of reducing risk through protection and through compliance. PKWare's approach to solving this particular problem around data discovery and protection. And we're going to leave you with 5 actionable steps for strengthening your data security. So as we begin this conversation, the first thing we'd like to talk about is the risks of unseen data. So Jason, why don't you talk us through this?
Sure. Without a comprehensive data security and data discovery program, what we typically see is that there's a large amount of data inside of the organization that the organization really doesn't have a good handle on, or that people doesn't even know that it exists. The unknown data typically falls into 2 categories. The industry refers to them as dark data and shadow data. Dark data lives on data sources that you're aware of. You know where your database is, your cloud data repositories, the big data lakes are, and the like. You know what the repositories exist, but maybe aren't necessarily as clear on the nature of the data inside those repositories. So that's dark data. In addition to those blind spots, a lot of the organizations have shadow data inside. Shadow data are those repositories of information that are outside of the organization's officially sanctioned IT systems. And typically those are maintained without the knowledge or control of the IT department. Both dark data and shadow data represent real risk to an organization. As it says here, the average cost of a data breach and an inadvertent leak of sensitive data continues to increase and currently is at about $4.88 million on average. It's a combination of direct financial damages. It's also a combination of indirect costs like lost revenue, reputational damage, along with regulations and compliance penalties. This cost typically scales in proportion to the amount of sensitive data that's lost. We can jump to the next slide. The reality of this risk is simple, right? The cost of the breach dwarfs the cost of prevention. If you're preemptive in your approach to mitigating risks, not only are you protecting your business, but with integrated and automated solutions, you're empowering the business to operate efficiently. You're taking the burden off of employees and users to constantly be worrying about security missteps and the risk associated with the data. Mitigating these risks extends outside of the organization as well, right? So how you're sharing sensitive information with business partners is also on the table here. Recently, it hit the news that some of America's biggest banks are limiting their sharing with the OCC because of breaches at the OCC and their email infrastructure. All this does is continue to highlight the importance of understanding your data and not just where it lives, but also where it moves, and then making sure that it's protected every step of the way. As this side says at the bottom here, organizations that rely on detection and response only, it's like installing a sprinkler system after the building's already on fire. So now I'll turn it back to EJ. He's going to talk about the power of data discovery as the first step to mitigating the costs associated with these risks.
Thanks, Jason. I think it's really important to make note of what Jason was just talking about and the fact that the risk around data and both internal data and external sharing of information is the fact that you have not only the risk of the data itself, but the reputational risk that comes with this. So Jason talking about large financial institutions not sharing information with the OCC or worrying about it, or any of the breaches that have happened in the last month or 2 months or 3 months are around reputational risk. So, taking control of your security infrastructure, taking control of the protections of your information starts with understanding the data itself. So you can't worry about controlling your environment. You can't worry about protecting your environment until you understand what your environment is. Know your data. So if you are able to put your data protections in, starting at that baseline level, starting at the concept of knowing what your data is, where that data is located, and how that data is being utilized, that's your first step in making sure that the information doesn't go to the wrong places, it doesn't go to the wrong people, and it doesn't find its way outside of your organization unintentionally. We talk about on this slide, and we talk about at PKWARE in general, the concept of utilizing um, the ability to protect the information upon discovery. So trying to reduce your false positives, making sure that you are reliable in the results that you are finding. And by finding those results and protecting those results, what you're really doing is reducing the attack surface that your enemies have, your hackers, your internal people making bad decisions, or nefarious information that's happening, nefarious actions that are happening with you inside of your organization. So shrinking your footprint reduces the ability to have your data in the right locations. And if you do that, keeping with Jason's theme about sprinklers and fire, if we can the data can lead you to the smoke, which then leads you to the fire. So what we're trying to do is be as preventative as we can be, and be as preemptive in our security as we can going forward. Next slide, please. So how do you do that? The way that you do that, certainly at PKWARE, our story is that what you need to be able to do is find the information, report your findings, and then protect it. So it's a find and fix model, if you will. We are attempting to utilize discovery as a means to provide a better secure outcome for your organization. Discovery allows you to define your data boundary, understanding where that information happens to be. Is it on file servers? Is it on endpoints? Is it in cloud repositories? Is it in SharePoint or OneDrive? Is it in your Hadoop cluster, in a data lake, in databases, structured, unstructured data, even on your mainframes? Your data can live in all of those places, and understanding where that is and discovering where that is and identifying that information gives you the ability to have a successful boundary that you can set. Once you've done that, for us, going hand in hand with discovery is this concept of protection. So building controls around the way that your users interact with your data, or that your data interacts with its environment, allows you to set a series of compensating controls for your organization to say, this is where my data lives. This is the manner in which I want to protect that information. And then the last step of that for us is to say, where do you want to apply that? You should have one set of policies that allows you to do things like PCI or HIPAA, or worry about PII inside of your organization. One policy, regardless if it's structured or unstructured, or on your mainframe, or wherever the target happens to be. We want to give you a single pane of glass in terms of creating policy, so that you don't have to have redundant policies that are based on locations, not based on the data, and not based on that outcome. So you have a boundary. You have controls that are in place. You identify the targets that you want to apply that information to. And then what do? You witness the results. What do we do? What information do I have? Is it safe? Is it not safe? Is it sensitive? Is it not sensitive? Where does that data locate? Where is that data located? And how do I move forward to be able to take control over that? So when we think about controlling the information and controlling your data with protections, the normal answers to to protections are around encryption. And we can talk about encryption. PKWARE's got a very, very strong encryption story. We have a long history of providing with that. We also can talk about masking or redaction. But one of the cornerstones around protecting information is not having information around. So Jason, why don't you talk a little bit about how data retention can be a cornerstone of what we're doing going forward?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And digging into data retention as a protection strategy really surprises a lot of people. But here at PK, where we really think that it should be thought of as the first form of data protection that organizations should consider. Typically, when people start talking about data retention, they're thinking about the minimum amount of time that they have to hang on to data, how long that data needs to be preserved for compliance reasons. Uh, we really think that organizations should start thinking about data retention in terms of the maximum amount of time that data should be preserved. Because of the reasons here, we've got data hoarding, which is a pervasive mentality across a lot of organizations, relatively cheap storage of data, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And really just the lack of the fortitude inside of the organization to say like it's okay to delete data. What we typically see is that organizations are hanging on to data way, way longer than they need to. One of the things that I like to talk about is data has the most value the instant that it's created, and then immediately that the value of that data decreases over time. At the same time, the risks that are associated with that data continue to increase. So really, as an organization, you need to take a hard look at your data and understand, where's that intersection? Where is the value of that data lower than the risk that that data represents to the organization? And then I guess the question is then what do you do about it? So hit the next slide. Data deletion, right? When the risk is higher than the value, more often than not, the appropriate mitigation strategy is to delete the data. Deletion reduces risk. It minimizes insider threat. It helps with compliance. For instance, if you don't have the data, that data can't violate GDPR or CCPA if it's not there, right? Additionally, you get some added benefits around costs. There is this perception that it's cheap to hang on to data. That's why the data hoarding happens. And while storing data is relatively inexpensive to say like 20 years ago, it still costs about $20,000 a month per petabyte of data that you're storing in the cloud. And on-prem costs are relatively similar, typically actually a little bit less. Bottom line is deletion saves money. And finally, deletion can help limit liability in legal cases. You need to ensure that only necessary data is retained to comply with regulations and be comfortable with letting everything else go. Next slide.
Thanks, Jason. So let's spend a couple of minutes talking about PKWARE, this construct that Jason's been talking about and that I've been talking about in terms of utilizing discovery as an asset and then finding the best way to protect the information within your organization. Okay, so the first thing that we talk about is PKWARE providing you preemptive data protection. So let's talk a little bit about what preemptive data protection means. Instead of building a traditional data protection model, which is building a wall around your data or digging a moat to protect your information, worrying about access inside of your organization. Most data data protection strategies that companies have are target specific. How do I protect my endpoints? How do I protect my servers? What am I doing about my cloud repository? And they are outside in viewed. So everybody is worrying about keeping the bad guys out of the organization and worrying about what is going to happen when they get in. So the first thing that I would say, and I think Jason has kind of talked about it within this presentation, is that the bad guys are going to get in. So the likelihood of you stopping people from entering your network is really very, very low. The worst thing that you can do is say that I have protected my assets so that nobody is going to be able to come in that I don't expect. That's not a realistic expectation. Credentials get stolen all the time. If you're not using MFA, you've got problems in terms of wondering who is the right person that's actually entering my organization. People have machines at home and get access to their sensitive data from a machine that hasn't been hardened by your IT organization. So what do you need to do? We talk about it being preemptive. Preemptive protection means that as the data is created, when it is the highest form of value to your organization, let's apply the protection at that point. Let's instantly decide if that data, as it is writing to disk, has sensitive information inside of it. And if it does, and it has been identified as such, let's apply the appropriate protection to that data. What's appropriate protection mean? Appropriate protection could be, I have a credit card, let's encrypt that file. I have a social security number, let's redact that information. I have a proprietary or unique account number. Let's redact part of that information or mask it in a way that still makes it useful, but allows it to be safe where it happens to be stored. In your organizations, regardless of the protections that you put in place, there are always temp directories. There's always download directories. There's always desktops that exist. There are tables, temp tables that exist in your databases that are in the cloud or in your data structures. There's all sorts of little cubby holes, nooks and crannies that exist in your data model that have data in it that can't be protected. So if the data is protected when it is created, it is the best chance for you to be able to have an ability to take control of it and allow yourself to have the protections that are in place. The second thing around that is that if the data is protected in inception, you have the best chance of sharing it appropriately with the appropriate protections. So first thing is create the data. We found it. We've provided protection to it. The next thing we're doing is, as Jason kind of talked about in the previous two slides, is that we have to decide how long we should keep that data. So Jason talked about what's the length of time that we have to worry about it. I always think about there's magic numbers when it comes to data retention. Traditionally in regulated industries, it's 3, 5, 7, and 10. Those are the big numbers that happen to be around. All right. Keep PAI for three years. The 7 years, many banks say you can only keep sensitive data around for 7. 10 years is the worst case scenario that people talk about in terms of holding data within your organization. If you think about retention today, it's 2025. 10 years ago is 2015. You have data in your downloads folder that's older than 2015. So we have got retention policies that are easy wins for you. What does data retention do, by the way? It makes your servers run faster because you have less data that run on those servers. It makes your cloud repositories smaller, so you spend less money with your cloud providers to be able to hold that data up, and you lower your risk about somebody grabbing data that no owner has anymore. In other words, the person has left the company, person no longer has transitioned to some other role, and you have a greater sense of control within that state. So retention is super powerful within that. That third bucket that we're talking about here in terms of our platform is around adhering to those regulatory and compliance concerns that we talked about. I talked about boundary and compensating controls, targets, and results. That is the foundation of what you do to present your information going forward to external organizations. Present them what they have when they need it in an appropriate fashion is what scanning and protections are about, and reducing that surface and centralizing that data, providing it into unique places. I'm going to centralize all of my PII data into one spot so that my regulator doesn't have to look at everywhere in my environment. They can only look at particular places, allows me to increase the protection of my information and lower my risk that goes on. If the data is protected, if the data is controlled, if our regulators think that data is right, then guess what? Sharing externally becomes much easier for us to be able to handle our information. We are only sharing what's appropriate. We're only sharing what's necessary. And therefore, our ability to handle that information externally works works more effectively and keeps us off the front page of the papers, right? Last piece and the last benefit that you get out of our platform, we've talked all about proactively and preemptively keeping our data intact. If we are masking data appropriately, if we're redacting what is necessary, that means that the data that sits in our test and our development environments, our lower environments, has been protected. It's been de-identified. It is no longer a risk to leak outside of our organization. And that also means the applications that we're building are going to run effectively. They're not going to break when they go into production, and we're going to be in a much better state going forward. So that provides us one set of ways of making this happen. This story of protection has been successful for us to be able to articulate in heavily regulated industries with customers like you see on the screen. So banking customers, financial service customers, insurance companies, and healthcare companies all utilize this concept of identification of data, safety at creation, providing the appropriate protection to the data. By the way, what's the appropriate protection for these kind of companies? Is it classification? Is it encryption? Is it redaction? Is it masking? Is it tombstoning and moving data to another part? The answer is yes. The right answer is the one that works correctly within your environment. So use what is appropriate. Don't use only what you have available. Use what's appropriate for you. We give you a rich set of options that you are able to go forward with. And so customers like this support and have confidence in PKWARE, and we certainly hope that you would have that same confidence going forward. So what are the takeaways that I want to give you? I'm going to give you these 5 simple takeaways. The first one, I think we've hammer this home as best we can, is identify and classify the sensitive data that you have everywhere. Utilize one product that does discovery and does protection, but one product that scans endpoints and file servers and cloud repositories and databases and data that lives everywhere across your organization, reduces your ability to have 3 experts in 3 or 4 or 5 different products. You don't have to have a different product to scan endpoints that scans servers or scans databases. You have one product, which means you build expertise around that product, which means you don't have to worry as much around false positives and false negatives, and you have an ability to provide success and protections. Second one is reduce the exposure. This whole concept of retention that we've been talking about, reducing the exposure means that the appropriate data that you have is there, it has been protected, and it is easier to share because the data is already safe as it sits at rest within your own organization. The third thing is be fresh with your retention policies. Be up to date. Worry about the dates change as we go forward. The time is always moving forward, but again, as Jason said, that important factor is the most important time that the data needs to be in your organization is the time it's been created. So take that factor of data value versus data risk, and then we can we can take our way to having the safest protections that we've got across the board and across our organization. Fourth, don't bolt on security. Security should not be an afterthought of your organization. It should be part of the workflow and part of the outcome that you're trying to deliver. So ensure that those protections are in place at the beginning, not after you've created it and you're wondering about what's the best way to band-aid and protect the information at the end. And the last thing is the reason you have data protection is so that your data doesn't leak, but the reason you have data protection is so that you can continue to make money at your companies. So business processes have to be in hand with the information that you've got and with the workflows that you end up having. So those are the 5. I'll leave you one last thought, which is when it comes to data in your organization, you need to bring your security fight to the data. This isn't about worrying about just your environment, worrying about a particular target, or worrying about particular things. What we're doing is understanding what data we have in our environment, protecting it as protecting it as it is at let's try it again. Protecting it as it is created. That was not as hard as it really came out to be. Making sure that you're using the right protections at the right time. And the last thing is making sure that the data is in a place where you can have it protected and visible to everywhere else, because we want to keep going with that smoke and fire metaphor as much as we possibly can. So let's all light up. No, okay, that's it. That's the end of the story that we have here, Sarah. I don't know if we have any questions, but
We did have one question. It looks like we probably only have time for one. The one question that came through, obviously we talked a lot about data retention. So did you have any use cases of customers that are currently using data retention as part of their strategy? Like a complex question about it?
sure. Jason, I'll give one. I don't know if you have want to feed into this, but so some of our large banking customers, banking and financial services customers, worry about have to hold particular sets of data of customer information. So a lot of PAI, and a lot of that PAI may be account numbers, maybe credit cards, maybe information like that. And so what they do is that as the data as data is discovered within their environments, what the first thing that they do is that they segregate that data. So they move it from wherever the creation point happens to be to a centralized location, either on an endpoint or on a file server, and notify the owners of that information. It happens to exist. That data only lives in that spot for 30 days. And that after 30 days, if the user hasn't either corrected that data, i.e., cleaned out, taken what they needed to be able to take, or encrypted it or provided some other remediation to it, that data is either moved to a secure location within their organization or it's deleted. It goes forward. So they are using retention as one of their remediations within their organization, just like they use masking or just like they use encryption.
Okay, great. Jason, anything to add? Good.
The only thing I would add on top of that is, data retention is a complicated topic for a lot of our customers, in that it's not just the data itself, it's where that data lives, who has access to it, who the data owner is. So there's a lot of factors around the data, and those are things that our software takes into consideration when you're setting up those data retention policies. It's not just find a social security number in a file that's 10 years old and then just delete it, right? So you have to be able to account for all those factors, and that's what we help our customers do.
Great. Okay, well, thanks, guys. We really appreciate it, and thank you everyone that joined us today. And as always, if you have any questions or want to reach out, visit us at pkware.com.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks.